Welcome to the Midland Money Mindset. This is a podcast that's all about getting your mind right when it comes to all things money. In every episode, we go deep with engaging guests who provide tangible takeaways and a whole lot of joy along the way. I hope you enjoy these conversations as much as I enjoyed having them. Let's dive into today's show. Well, I'm here today with Miriam Schulman, artist, artpreneur, and founder of the Inspiration Place. Thank you so much for joining us today, Miriam. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Well, thanks for having me, Larry. It's an honor.
Yeah, thank you. So, I've done some background work and learned a lot about you, on the internet and from your website, and I follow you now. But so our audience has an understanding of who you are and what you're about. Can you tell them a little bit about who Miriam Schulman is and how you got to where you are today?
Okay, so I've been an artist for over 20 years, and for the last few years, I've been coaching artists how to make more money because we need more artists, less starving artists in this world. And before I was an artist, I was also in finance, Larry. I worked for I worked on Wall Street, and I worked for an infamous hedge fund. And after 9/11 happened, I decided I was not going to do that anymore. So that's how we ended up here today, talking about not finance. Unless you want to talk about my days in finance. So there we go.
Well, who was the hedge fund?
Long-Term Capital Management, LTCM.
Ah, okay. So they had issues in the 90s, right?
Yeah, they famously imploded in 1998. I was still working there, and we lost between $4 and $5 billion. So.
Yeah, that was like my first full year in the profession, and I remember because that was one of the first major events that I experienced in my career. Now fast forward 26, 27 years later, and it seems like there's always one of those events every few years that kind of has a major impact on things. So basically 9/11 was your calling to find something different and to take the starving out of artists. And what did you decide to do at that point?
Well, it would be lovely if that moment said, I'm going to paint, and then everything was rainbows and daisies. But the truth is, like most people have been told, you can't make a living this way. So I didn't believe, and this is why I didn't become an artist right away. I didn't believe I could make a living. Even then, I knew I didn't want to go back to finance, but I didn't believe yet. So I was painting on the side, and I took a job as a Pilates instructor. And the gym were teaching us instructors how to upsell to personal training packages, because that is one of the big ways that gyms make money. And when they're teaching me these sales skills, that's when I had an aha moment. I was like, oh, these skills can be used to sell my portraits. And then it was bye-bye gym. And I used those skills as well as continue to be a student of marketing so that I can do this on my own. So that is really my full story.
Amazing. So you were able to take your passion and turn it into a business and be an entrepreneur, right?
That's right. And so somewhere along that line, I started online classes. I began the podcast, The Inspiration Place, in 2018. And shortly after that, people really wanted to find my secret, and wanted to work with me. So that's when I started the Artist Incubator Coaching Program.
Fantastic. Have you ever read The Minimalist Entrepreneur?
No, I don't think so. Who's the author?
I don't recall the author off the top of my head. He was the founder of Gumroad. But I just finished that book just recently, and it reminds me of kind of that path you took, kind of stepping away from a career, launching into your passion. It might be interesting to you to take a look at that, because I think it would resonate with you greatly.
Thank you. I'll look that up. I just wrote it down.
Yeah. I've heard you speak on embracing your inner weirdo. to fulfill your destiny as entrepreneur. Can you expand on that? Give us some context about that and kind of expand on that concept.
Sure. So first of all, let's talk about what the word weird actually means. So if you were made to read Macbeth at any time during your education, and if you didn't, good for you. But if you did, there were the three witches, which were called the Weird Sisters. And weird is actually a Scottish word that means fate or destiny or even magical. So that's really what that meant. They were magical witches who were predicting Macbeth's fate. But what happened was over time, as the supernatural became vilified, the word weird took on a negative connotation. So that's why now we think of it weird as being something negative. But really, when you're embracing what's weird, you're embracing what's magical about yourself and you're embracing your destiny.
That's amazing. And, I did not realize that was the origination. One of the things that I talk about is, being your authentic self and kind of letting your freak flag fly, whatever that may be, because you'll ultimately let that freak flag fly and you'll attract people who know, like, and will trust you because they have similar experiences and thought processes to the way you are. So it sounds like that's a similar type of kind of connotation as well.
Absolutely. So in Artpreneur, I talk about the 5 parts to build your business. And then many of you will recognize that this is true of all businesses, not just art businesses, but it's producing a marketable product, pricing, prospecting, promotion, and productivity. So the first question people ask is, well, what makes art marketable? And it is not about people pleasing. It is not about selling to the masses. It's not about trying to figure out what's popular and copy that. So what in that chapter, Embrace Your Inner Weirdo, I'm laying out a case for that any art that you ever looked at, art is never neutral and the artist is never neutral. The best artists in the world always have a point of view that contrasts with what came before it, which is, by the way, why I'm not worried at all about Chat GPT or any of those AI taking my jobs, because it doesn't have a point of view. And what makes really good art is that it has a point of view that is, like you said, it can be polarizing. Not everyone's going to like it. Even the most popular stuff in the world. Not everyone likes Beyonce. And certainly we've seen politicians who are wildly popular that a lot of us don't like at all. But if we try to please everyone, you never get there. There's absolutely no money in the middle. You need to have people love you and hate you and not strive for that mediocrity. Be that weird. Like you said, fly your freak flag, show your spectrum, lean into your quirks, show your values. Don't be afraid, because hiding isn't sharing.
Right.
So you have to be you have to really make yourself very vulnerable to succeed, especially as an artist.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. And, I find it very interesting how you talk about, business being transformative to art, because we have a number of authors that are clients of ours, that are, families that we serve here at Midland. And a lot of times when they first meet us or we have that first conversation with them, they say, oh, are you used to working with folks like us? And I'm like, well, what do you mean? Well, an author, I'm a writer. And I said, I understand that. I said, but ultimately you're a business person. You're an entrepreneur, same way as anybody else. It's just your craft is writing a book, right? And like you're talking, your craft is creating art. It's the same thing. And you have those same pillars that you mentioned in any business, and those remain true to an author who's another version of an artist. And it's really just similar to how you handle a business and working that way as such. You talk about passion to profit as a framework. What do you mean when you talk about that?
Okay. So let me just circle back for one moment to something you said interesting back there. And so I work in my coaching program with visual artists, but the book is geared towards artists with the full spectrum, the full definition. So authors, ceramicists, someone selling on Etsy. And what happens is once you broaden the definition of artist, really you can put anything in that. So whether your art is writing a book or your art is a sneaker store, whatever it is that you're producing, all these principles apply. So now you say, what is the passion to profit framework? That is those 5 P's I mentioned before. So what are you producing? Is it sneakers? Is it art? Is it a book? Is it financial services? Is it fixed income bonds? So what is it that you are producing? How are you pricing it? How are you finding your customers? That's prospecting. How are you selling it? That's the promotion piece. And productivity is really your systems of how you put these all things together so that you're not spinning your wheels and you know what to focus on first, second, and third.
And my assumption is that if you have those pillars, that passion, a profit framework, that just simply assists you in being a better business owner, entrepreneur, in having that framework in place on how you do those things. So when you need to add another teammate to the business, it kind of acts as, oh, this is how we do things around here.
That's right. Well, that falls more into the productivity, where I find a lot of people get tripped is even in the first 2 parts. And I'm not just talking about visual artists. So the first 2 are, what are you producing, and pricing, what are you selling it at? So I have a lot of people who come to me and they think that their problem, so this is the biggest thing that I see where business fail or business are struggling, is because they think their problem is in one area when really it's in another. So many entrepreneurs and artists and creatives and people starting their business, they think their problem is they don't have a big enough audience. They think they just need more social media followers, or they just don't have a big, but really they haven't fixed the first 2 problems, which what are you producing and what are you selling it at? So I'll have people come to me who make greeting cards that are maybe $5 each. I was like, well, to make $50,000 a year, you have to sell 10,000 of those. But I also see this problem in service providers. So maybe they're not charging enough per hour. I was like, well, you do realize you would have to work all day long and you won't be able to pee. And when are you going to find your customers? So right. I see this in all industries, and they just haven't done, and it's not calculus. This isn't economics. It's just the times table. It's really, what are you selling? What can you produce? What's your capacity per week of what you're offering or creating times? What are you pricing at that? And does that add up to the income that you want? And a lot of people don't do that very simple first step. So you either have to change what you're producing, so it's packaged differently, or change your prices. And usually it's both.
Right. And then you could worry about the rest and finding who's available, et cetera. But at least you have a framework for what are you producing? How much is it going to cost? How many of those or how many units do I need to sell over the course of the year to hit whatever that income goal is for me, right?
That's right. And then the second biggest problem I see is, we kind of hinted at before, people think all I need is to build a big social media following. Well, I don't know about you, Larry, but the Instagram reach and engagement has been falling dramatically over the past few years. And I can share some statistics around that. So when I first started writing my book, the average engagement rate was 1%. Last year, when I went to edit my book for the average person, the engagement rate had fallen to 0.6%. What does that mean? That means if you have 1,000 followers on Instagram, only 6 people are engaging with that. Okay, so what about those influencers, those ones who want you to pay them to build your huge audience, or how to get better engagement rate? You want to guess what their engagement rate is?
It's probably about the same, no?
Not much better. You're right. It's 1.12.
Just they have a bigger audience.
It's just 1.12%. So in other words, for an influencer who spends all their time doing this, out of 1,000 people, only 12. So what's the answer? Well, with email, the average open rate is around 24%. So out of 1,000 people, you have 240 people who are going to engage with you. So I did the math. You would need 4,000 people on Instagram to get the same engagement rate as only 100 email subscribers. 4,000 versus 100. So I don't know about you. It's a lot easier to find 100
100%.
people than 4,000. So that is the second big hurdle that I really have to work hard to help artists and your audience understand that we've been sold that this is like this easy thing, and the Instagram rates are the reach is dropping all the time. And it's not just because of the algorithm. People are just not on that platform as much as they used to be, or any social media platforms.
The other thing that you hadn't mentioned to this point, but I'm sure is mentioned in the book, is it's also a methodology that's out of your control, right? If one of those platforms want to change their algorithm, you're at their mercy. Whereas if you have them in that email list, in that campaign, you have control over what gets sent to them, what they potentially could see. You have a little bit, more control over how that all takes place than putting it out into social media verse, because they change the algorithm tomorrow and that 0.6 could very well go to 0.3 or even 0.1. Who knows what that number could go to.
Right. And here's the big difference, Larry, is that if I send you an email, you get to decide whether or not you open it. If I put the same message on social media, the algorithm decides if you even see it.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. We talked about it a little bit earlier about, aligning, selling in alignment with your values, and, that leads to potentially more sales, more opportunities. Why do you think that is, that it allows you to, up your game by, being authentic, I guess?
Yeah. So this is something, and the research backs this up. So there's some great research by Win Big Media that I included in the book Artpreneur. And that is, there's a large segment of the population, and their demographics show that this is a segment you want. They have the money to spend, and it's a conscious consumer, and they care about the values of the organizations that they're shopping with. Now, everybody has their own values. So somebody might care more about sustainability. Somebody else might care about ethical, employers. Like, I stopped using Twitter since Elon Musk came on board because I'm like, I don't want to be a part of that. Some people might care about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So that's something that is inclusivity is something that I care a lot about. So if a clothing catalog comes and it's all blondes, I won't shop from them. So, there needs to be some ethnicity included in that catalog. So people really care about it. Now, that does, again, you can't please everybody, but they want to know what your values are. And if you're not sharing your values, that is saying something as well. That is that you're not being transparent. So people do care about what your values are. And if you want to, again, not just try to please the middle, because there's no money in the middle, you can't be afraid of turning people off, because people will make their own opinions about you either way. So you might as well have them dislike you for the right reasons.
Right. And I think your point there is also that by having them dislike you, you're getting to that no much more quickly. You're not spending time, effort, and energy on those folks that are not aligned with your values. So it's actually saving you the time, effort, and energy to spend more time and more valuable quality time with those people who are in alignment with you as well.
That's right. We're not for everybody. Nobody is for everybody. Beyonce's not for everybody. As popular as she is, not everyone loves her. So we're not for everybody. So we can't pretend to be for everybody. So be honest and authentic and vulnerable about who you are and what you represent.
Yeah, I think that's something that's, a challenge for a lot of folks in my profession. I think they try to be everything to everyone. And typically they don't do a great job of that because they don't know how or who or what they should be doing or acting because they're trying to please everyone. Whereas we, as an organization, Mitlin and the families we serve, we want to be everything to a small select group of people that are in alignment with us. And we, rather than going, an inch wide and a mile deep, we're going an inch deep and a mile wide, right? And well, I said that reversed actually. We want to go an inch wide and a mile deep with those families we serve rather than an inch deep and a mile wide. We want to really be narrow and focused. And we do that by, putting ourselves out there and being authentic. And I think it's been tremendously helpful. And I've spoken on podcasts as a guest before saying that was something I was a bit adverse to about putting everything out there for a long time. Started doing it really proactively like 4 or 5 years ago. And we've seen a lot of good things happen as a result of that. So I think to your point, it's very important that, if you want to be a business owner, you want to create a situation where you're attracting people to your organization, that you have to put yourself out there and be authentic to do that.
Absolutely.
So we talked a little bit about the marketing piece and social media. How can people get in sync with the future of marketing? Is there anything else, if I'm a business owner, an artpreneur, or even just an entrepreneur, are there things that I should be thinking about beyond just the social media and beyond the email list in order to get ahead of the game or be able to see the future of where marketing is going? I think of the old Wayne Gretzky quote, "I want to go where the puck is going to be, not where it is." Any thoughts around that?
Yeah. So we talked about specifically the stats on Instagram. Unfortunately, what a lot of people falsely believe is that, oh, wait, maybe I should be on TikTok or maybe I should be over here. And we already laid the case. Email is where it's at. And whether it's Ryan Dice or Marie Forleo, like the king and queen of digital marketing, they're both saying that the future of marketing is email, but it's also about building these deeper connections that feel more like one-on-one connections with the people you have in your world. So it's not that I don't use social media, I do, but I don't use it as much to talk to from up on the the skybox.
Right.
I get into my direct messages. I'll DM people. Sometimes it will be some things I might automate with that, but I try to have these direct conversations with people who are in my audience and form that deeper relationship with them. Any way you can automate that, forming a stronger connection, of course, do it. But that is really, it's about forming these connections with human beings. Humans are craving connection.
Right. Yeah. And I think to your point, you want to automate it as best as possible, but there also has to be that personalization, because I know that I get inundated with, for instance, on the LinkedIn platform,
That's
constantly
the worst.
with people who are looking to, and that it's not a person on the other side, it's a bot. So, and I think that, people are getting better at being able to tell what is a true human being on the other end and what is not. So to your point, I could see how that is extremely helpful.
Yeah, if we can just talk about that for a minute. So when I'm talking about you shouldn't do, it's that feeling of somebody sends you a 3-paragraph DM, which is either sent by a bot or their VA. And to me, that's the same feeling as walking into a department store and getting sprayed with perfume. So an automated message I might use is I might on my podcast say, hey, if you're listening to this podcast, the Mitlin Money podcast, come find me on Instagram. I'm Schulman Art there, and DM me the word money. So I might, after this is over, go and code something where it says, if I get the word money, I might have an automated response say, hey, thanks for listening. What was your takeaway from our conversation. So that I might do. I don't know if I'm going to do it or not. So, but either way, if you DM me the word money, I'll know why you're DMing me. And if I have that automated message sent back and Larry writes back to me, or you, the listener, writes back to me, I will then answer it. But something that I might automate is if I'm getting thousands of DMs saying money, 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 money. Wouldn't that be amazing?
Yeah.
Money everywhere. If I then that would be something that I would automate. So I do that, like when I'm doing master classes and webinars and I want people to connect with me, I might have the first initial message be something that a chat will do, but then the follow-up is me, because then they want to hear from me.
I think the key there is they're initiating that contact
Correct.
with you. You're not trying to spray it out there.
That's right.
They're saying to you, hey, I heard you. I'm interested. I want to learn more. And then you're automating that to a piece to get what they were interested in, which is much different than just spraying out messages to people who weren't expecting or interested.
And there's a huge difference when they initiate that first message. It's like now they're giving you permission to talk to them. It's a big difference than you just going down your followers and saying, hey, do you want to hear about my coaching program? It's like, that doesn't
basically
work.
Hey, do you want to buy something from me?
That's
is really
right.
What you're saying, which is, most people are annoyed by that, or like your analogy, they don't want to get sprayed with that perfume walking into the store, right?
Right.
So, how can people romance customers to deepen their commitment and love for a brand? Because I think having those alignment and values is very important. And then really just deepening that relationship with that family, that person, that customer, however you deem it in your profession or your business. How do you go about doing that in an effective way?
Okay, so this is something, and I use in the book, Love Your Buyer, I make the analogy with the dating scene. So what I see a lot of artists do, or quote unquote networkers do, is they'll go to a party or they're at an art fair and they're handing out cards. Okay. So this is basically the equivalent.
We are very much in alignment, by the way.
Okay.
100%. Because that is a pet peeve of mine. I don't even bring cards to a networking event.
Yeah. So, here's the thing. This is the same thing as, and I see artists are the most guilty of this. They're at an art fair and they people are kind of interested and they give them their cards. So that's the same thing as if I was trying to pick somebody up at a bar and I was passing out my phone number. That is not a way to get a date. Like what do you, if I was, now I'm very traditional, so I'm going to use traditional genders with this. So if I were a guy and I wanted to pick up a pretty girl in the bar, I'm not going to be handing her my number. I'm going to be asking her for her number. So it's the same thing with business. You want to be in control of that relationship. You need their contact information because you're the lion. If you think they're going to chase after you, you're very confused.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. I don't even, like I said, I don't even carry business cards anymore. If somebody asks me for my contact information, we have an electronic version where they scan a QR code and they get all of our contact information. But if I find somebody that's interesting to me that I want to connect with, I want to get their information so I could follow up with them and build a relationship with them. I never understood people going out and handing out business cards to everybody. I'm like, do you know you're not going to hear from any of those people? Because just that act alone kind of is like, to me, it's like, well, not somebody I'm interested in really chatting with afterwards.
Yeah, and what I tell artists is that, so what they're doing it at art shows and they're passing out, I cringe every time an artist tells me it was a good show because they handed out a lot of cards. And I know I was there too in the beginning. I had this fantasy that everyone who took my card was going to go home and look me up on my website and purchase something. Like I had that fantasy, but most of the time they've thrown it out before they reach their car, or it's still in the bottom of their purse, or it's still in the bottom of their car, and nothing happens.
Right. Yeah, it's a shame. But what can you talk about the belief triad? What can business owners learn from that?
Okay, I love the belief triad. All right. So the belief triad, there's three parts. Two parts you may have heard before. So you need to believe in yourself. You need to believe in what you're selling. The third part is you need to believe in the buyer. So what does that look like? So my favorite analogy is talking about Pretty Woman, the movie with Richard Gere and Julia Roberts. Right. And for those who haven't seen it, so Julia Roberts is is playing a hooker, and Richard Gere says, "You can't dress this way. Here's my gold card." And she goes to Rodeo Drive, but she's not dressed appropriately, and the salespeople won't wait on her. Now that seems like an extreme version, and we're like, "Oh, we're not that mean salesperson." But how many times have we thought to ourselves in the act of doing business, "Oh, she won't buy my things. Oh, she probably won't pay these high prices." Or, I don't think that agent liked my work. We're thinking all these negative thoughts about them, about what they're thinking. And we can't mind read. We don't know what they want. So loving your buyer is you have to believe in them more than they believe in themselves. Because at the end of the day, Larry, if somebody is coming to buy my art, and let's say there's a painting that's $5,000, they're not trying to decide if Miriam Schulman is worth spending $5,000 on. They're trying to decide if if you wanted to buy my art, Larry, you're trying to decide if you, Larry, are worth spending $5,000 on to get this painting that you want. Right. Or if we're talking about financial services, if you're worth spending that money, if you're worth investing it, they're thinking about themselves. I mean, that is really the truth of business, is that everyone's always thinking about themselves and what's in it for them. So we can't forget that third part of the triad. You have to believe in them.
Wow. That's very powerful. And I think if people start concentrating on that, I think they'll see a lot of different results, perhaps, if they focus on that. We talk about empathy a lot, I think, when you're talking about working with families or even art getting it in the hands of a buyer or a customer. How does empathy for customers, is this tied into that belief triad in terms of having the empathy for them being able to buy and having faith in them, in their buying psychology leading to the ultimate sale? Is that more or less that same kind of concept?
Well, it's part of it. So one of the things I do inside Artpreneur is I present overcoming objections chart. And the things people say, like, it's too expensive, I can't afford it. And the purpose of that chart is not necessarily to get a yes at all costs. The point of that is to understand what's going through the minds of your customer when they're saying these things. So when somebody says it's too expensive, that may not be what that may not even be what they're thinking, because we can't believe everything people say. But it could mean they've never invested that kind of money before. They feel very uncomfortable. So some of these questions can help tease it out. Is it real? Is price really their only objection? And not just believe the first thing they say and take that at face value. So you really want to tease out, is that really their true objection, or is there something else going on? And again, it's not to get a yes at any cost, but you really do want to understand and have compassion for your buyer's mindset. They may have pricing drama and money drama of their own that they need to overcome. So you need to meet them where they're at.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And, one of the things I remember very early on, I was in, when I first started in the profession, I started at a firm where it was like, get the yes at all costs, right? And it was one of those situations. And one thing that we learned, which I think this piece still rings true with me today, that if somebody gives you the same objection like 3 or 4 times, typically that is the objection, like they can't get past that. But when they give you one objection the first time and then a different one the second time and then a different one the third time, then typically that's on us, that I feel like in our situation, we haven't done a well enough job or a good enough job in explaining the value we bring. And I put it back on us in that situation, because if we were able to do that, the objection wouldn't need to change. It would be either yes, or there's some other thing that, there's some other singular roadblock that's getting us from going where we are to actually, moving forward and working together.
That's right. So if they're giving you something such as I need to think about it, first of all, just know that anytime someone needs to think about it, they're feeling uncomfortable, and they're not, by giving them more time, they're not going to get more comfortable. By giving them more time, you're giving them more time to come up with more reasons why this thing isn't going to work for them, because that's what our brains do. So understanding these things is that if somebody is coming to you with, I need to think about it, perhaps you are projecting uncertainty yourself. Perhaps you gave them too many choices. So you have to think about so that is the whole point of having compassion for your buyer and understanding where they're coming from, so that you can reflect on yourself and be accountable for the results that you're getting.
Yeah, great stuff. I've heard you talk about women's underwear brands can help businesses understand the customer's buying journey. And I think that that's kind of funny and interesting at the same time. Can you share what do you mean by that?
Yeah. So in the chapter, Think Like an Abundant Artist, I give 14 lessons to understanding what's going on in a buyer's mind, because what drives a person, a woman, let's say, to spend to buy a 10-pack of Hanes for $14.97, which works out to $1.50 in underwear, versus dropping $400 for a lace thong. So, what's the difference? And it's not just, the person has more money, because I have all kinds of underwear in my drawer, like lots of different kinds. So really understanding. And so I go through all the different reasons that drive people, not just to purchase, but to purchase at a premium, by working through all the different types of underwear that are available, like whether it's Victoria's Secrets, that's maybe $6 a pair, that's significantly higher. So it's really to help people understand the concept that price is not always the deciding factor, because a lot of us have this false belief that cheaper is easier to sell, and it just isn't. Otherwise, everybody would be reaching for the Hanes underwear. And even on the Walmart website, the underwear is not, the default search is not lowest price. The default search is most popular.
True. I think that's an interesting analogy and way to look at things. And I think it's, very, very beneficial for businesses to kind of think about that and align it with their own buyer avatar, kind of how their thought process is, to make sure that their journey is lined up with what they're buying, their buyer the buyer they want to attract and what they're looking for, and make sure that those are aligned. This is great stuff. And I think the biggest point for me is, it doesn't matter if it's art. It doesn't matter if it's, like you said, the financial profession. It doesn't matter if it's underwear. These are all concepts that you've wrapped up in your book that really cover any business. Doesn't matter what you're doing, and it's very relevant and could be pulled into to any business. So Miriam, it's been a pleasure having you on, and we end each show by asking each of our guests the same question. This is the Midland Money Mindset, and we do love talking about joy. And the question is, what did you do today that brought you joy and put you in the right mindset for success?
Oh, great question. I started the morning with a yoga class, because I make time for exercise Monday through Friday, because that sets me up for success for the rest of the day.
That's amazing. Yeah, I like exercising too. I'm not a morning exerciser, though. I'm an evening exerciser, but I can definitely tell the difference when I don't exercise. So that really sets us up. So we're going to have all of your information in the show notes. So people, if they want to contact you, buy the book, Artpreneur, learn more about you, they're going to have that information there. But if people want to contact you, what's the easiest and best place for them to do that?
If you liked what I said today, there's more of that on the Inspiration Place podcast. Wherever you're listening to the Midland Money Mindset podcast, come find the Inspiration Place. And
amazing.
Then, can I give them the free chapter?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So if you're a reader, then I would invite you to get chapter 1 for free, schulmanart.com/believe.
Yeah, I think the takeaway for me would be, I think if you're a little hesitant because you're not sure how this is relevant, read that first chapter, and I think you'll see very quickly how these concepts that are in this book, whether you are an artist or not, can really be relevant to what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. And I encourage you to check out the book. So it's been a pleasure having you on. I thank you for your time, and make it a great day.
All right. Well, thank you.